So you all know about the program that we have called Heal.LA, which was started about 3 years ago, focused on, and we just had no idea how to do this, focused on connecting innovations that were available in the area to opportunities in communities that otherwise are not connected to those innovations. That's sort of the broad backdrop. We're going to have the companies that are in this particular cohort present tomorrow. Monica is on the steering committee, as is Stephen of Heal.LA. But each of these folks have had a strong relationship with the life sciences in general and innovation in particular. And I will let each of them introduce themselves, Monica Jain, Stephen Cheung, and also talk about their perspectives, both on the issue of how innovations are driven in this community and can be driven for the benefit of populations that otherwise would not be well served, innovators and entrepreneurs who can be better served by this new kind of resilience that we are seeing in the sector. And then Stephen, you can talk about how you identify the life sciences. By the way, Stephen is CEO, relatively new CEO of the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, and this morning you were not here this morning, otherwise you would have heard my paean and tribute to LAEDC for birthing us 30 years ago, which I say with a great degree of pride and indulgence. So anyway, Monica, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Jain. I'm at Cedars-Sinai. I'm a surgeon there and also the Surgical Innovation Officer. And I'm also a partner at Wavemaker 360 Health, which is an early stage venture fund here in LA. So I kind of sit on both sides of the equation. So I can evaluate companies on the investment side, and then also I'm working with a lot of the companies in their early stage development process, working with them as they come through the hospital, seeing all of the issues that they encounter. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and you'll hear me speak about anytime you hear me, is about implementation and adoption of healthcare startup companies specifically. I know we're transitioning from the last panel, but healthcare startup companies and the difficulty that there is with implementing new technologies in healthcare. Healthcare is a very traditional sector. It takes a lot to engender change in healthcare, and you have to really understand the system on a ground level in order to understand how to implement various technologies into that space. And so that's something that I think Heal.LA works very well with, because the mentors are working with these companies to help them understand the sector and understand what's important. Everything from how doctors and nurses function, and so how to implement a technology into that space, in addition to reimbursement. So even if you have the best technology in the world that everyone loves, if you can't get it reimbursed, it's not going to be able to be adopted, and various things like that. And so the Heal.LA mentors really assist companies in that way and are helping them be more innovative and understand the major problems in the sector in order to be able to really push the sector forward in what has traditionally been a pretty stagnant environment that's now really, as Rohit said, is seeing some resilience and some more innovation now more than ever before.
Monica, you also deal with this network of doctors. Are you still doing that, working with them to be able to make them available to startups and others that might need access to their intelligence, their wisdom, their experience, etc.? Are you still doing that?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very important to get any clinicians into companies at the ground level at that 0 to 1 phase, because the earlier that you get the experts involved, the better that it is for that company's development. And so getting doctors involved helps them have input into the innovations so that that improves adoption. It also improves the ability of the startup to be able to develop their product from the ground up without having to get to the point that they're implementing their technology into the hospital or healthcare environment, wherever they're implementing it, realize that there are issues and go all the way back to the first stage and start again. And so that saves a lot of money and time and really helps in the innovation process. And so that's one of my passions is getting doctors, nurses, whoever the person is that startup needs to that startup so that they can develop from the beginning in an appropriate
You've got a network
manner.
of these folks already that you're working with. That's
right.
really amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen. You've been championing, not just because it's an LA thing, but because it makes sense, right? The whole notion of biosciences. I like to say, and I am going to trademark this quite apart from the previous comment that I made about CARP, that LA is the gene pool of the world. There is no more diverse a population of relatively new vintage than LA is, and you know this as a surgeon and as a doctor, Monica, what that means for the future of personalized medicine, for example, right? But Stephen, you saw all of this. You saw the growth of like the workforce issues associated with the life sciences, and you made it one of your top priorities. Talk to us about that.
Good afternoon again, Stephen Cheung with the LAEDC, as well as the World Trade Center Los Angeles. Now, talk about that a bit. LAEDC is a nonprofit that was created by the LA County Board of Supervisors 42 years ago. And over the years, we've evolved our mission quite a bit based on the needs of this entire region. And LA has changed quite a lot in the last 42 years. And as we're coming out of COVID, one of the things we're looking at is basically what can we do to ensure the future competitiveness of this region? And laissez-faire approach of just sitting here waiting for the best thing to happen hasn't really worked out for everybody. It's obviously worked out for some industries and some individuals, but in order for this entire ecosystem to move together, we really need to lay out this strategy of this cohesion that needs to be brought in place. So that's why LADC decided to utilize a 5-pillar approach, which I'll talk about later, to really help drive this ecosystem change. And one of the reasons why we selected bioscience and life sciences as our focal area and focal point is because if you look at the job creation aspect, the business opportunities, it's a good bet for this region, right? The average salary is close to $100,000, and as we're growing into it, a lot of these jobs don't require 4-year degrees or graduate degrees. So for an entire ecosystem to grow, we want to make sure we provide as many jobs as possible for as many people as possible, and this is a good industry. The other thing, you look at the competitiveness of LA, to your point, we have the population to sustain a lot of these technology companies that are growing in here. And weighing out with some of the other options, a lot of folks are talking about manufacturing. Look, we're never going to be able to compete with a lot of the Asian manufacturers on cheap shoes and cheap shirts. But when it comes to manufacturing of various biopharmaceuticals and different products, we actually have a competitive advantage. So that's why LADC has chosen to really invest in this entire region and this entire sector as a growth sector, as a way of for us to invest in this sector so that the payoff later on can be huge.
It's great. I mean, I don't know how many of you here know, but LA is increasingly becoming, and I'm not just saying this because it's a parochial issue, but it's an issue of intelligence and the application of good technology. LA has become, or is becoming, a center for AI-driven robotics manufacturing. Up and down the 405 corridor in Orange County, I'm talking about the LA region now, I'm not going to be so parochial as to say just LA City or LA County, but the entire region because it's connected. Even the Inland Empire, in Thousand Oaks and points along the 101. So it is becoming actively, there's an interesting new documentary that's out. It's also out on YouTube, you can watch it, on the evolution of that industry that has multiple facets to it. Material science, new AI algorithms and science behind computer science, and then of course also the whole biosciences and the community of folks that can actually use those products. So thank you for that, Stephen. Talk about the World Trade Center Association and your affiliation, your association with that. Plus, you've been a long-standing leader of the WTCA. So yeah. I'm curious about your issue on the export and the world trade.
Yeah. So the World Trade Center Los Angeles is a subsidiary of LAEDC. So think of it as an international trade arm for LAEDC. LA has determined that this is such a global magnet that we need to put special efforts and attention to our international partners. And look, we're competing with the rest of the world. LA is such a major market, and sometimes we underestimate ourselves and we don't even think how complex this region is, right? Just LA County alone, 88 different cities, over 100 incorporated regions, about 10 million people that live here. Our GDP by ourselves is close to $860 billion. So if we were a country by itself, it would be easily 20th, 21st in the world as a nation. This is not a small country. Our GDP is larger than that of the Netherlands and Belgium and Saudi Arabia. So that's why when we're looking at the world, and the world's looking at us, they're looking at us with a different lens. They want to be here because not only is it such a huge market from a buying standpoint, because 10 million people is also 10 million consumers. And by the way, once they get here, it's, to your point, it's not just LA County. It's the five county, the greater Los Angeles region, but it's really Southern California. It's the 40 million people that live in Los Angeles, in California. But once they get here, because the connectivity we have by rail, by whatever it is, with the rest of the nation, I don't know whether you know, but we have the #1 and #2 container ports in North America, with the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, controlling 40% of all cargo coming into the United States. We have the world's #1 origin destination airports in the world. Look, when you count the number, just raw number, right? Atlanta and JFK will have higher numbers than us, but it's because they're transferring.
Denver.
But the thing is, when you just count the people getting on and off a plane because they want to be here, LA is the #1 origin and destination airport.
Also known as La La Land, by the way.
That's right. So combined together, that's why the world is really paying attention to what we're doing here and all the innovation that we've been just talking about. So when we don't tell the story, other folks are telling our story for us, and that's why you hear these, and look, there are going to be negative stories as well. We have to acknowledge that it's challenging to do business here, but it's not all doom and gloom. And sometimes when it's just talking about the doom and gloom, we're not able to attract international companies that are coming here the way that we want to. But even without much effort, they're already coming here. So why not take advantage of it and make sure that we identify where the gaps are and identify the companies that can fill that gap. And so that's what World Trade Center does, is identify these gaps. And we go to Japan, we go to the UK, we go to Latin America to find the right companies to bring them here so they can be part of the ecosystem to provide the solution.
How does the work in biosciences, let's say specifically, you've been to Korea, I know that, and how does that translate into kind of effective understanding of what is going on in LA and their interest in coming and collaborating with us?
Well, again, the market is huge for them here. Once they enter Los Angeles, they see this as a launching point for the rest of the North American market. So they really need to be here. And second, specifically Korea, I don't know whether you know this, but Los Angeles is the largest Korean city outside of Korea. It's the 6th largest Korean city population in the world with Korean population, right? So already you have a built-in base of partners, competitors, and supply chain partners. Then once they get here, then basically it's easier for them to invest here, but then they use this as a base to launch their effort for the rest of the nation.
That's where you have the only city in the country that has a Korean-Mexican burrito, But I mean, Monica,
I'd love to add to the LA love when it comes to that, especially on the bioscience side. We have Cedars-Sinai.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We have Cedars-Sinai, we have UCLA, we have USC, we have a number of other big institutions here that are all medical expertise. We have a number of pharma companies, we have a number of medical device companies all in this area. And so it's not just the LA diversity and everything that we can offer from that perspective. We also have all the expertise, and people don't really see that when they initially think of LA. They think of LA as Hollywood glitz and glam and La La Land. And actually we have a huge bioscience industry here and expertise here. And once they actually see that and come here, then they really understand. And so I really, stand behind Stephen when he talks about we need to tell our story. And so like Cedars-Sinai, for example, is going out and telling our story. And so we have partnerships with people in Singapore doing that as well. We have hospital locations in China and in Israel and in Saudi Arabia and other places where we're trying to bring Cedars-Sinai expertise to these other countries as well, and then also bring those patients back to LA. And so we're even contributing further to the diversity and the expertise and the population that's here. And so we're really just a one-stop shop, especially when it comes to bioscience, and being able to tell that story to people across the world is so crucially important.
What are you seeing, Monica, in terms of some of the more kind of revolutionary areas of medicine that you're seeing currently develop in and around the biosciences, and how does it apply in LA? I mean, I talked about personalized medicine. It's been talked about for the last 10 years, right, or 15 years. The age of personalized medicine is upon us. Is it now here? And if it is, Cedars, by the way, which is a remarkable institution. I don't have to speak for them. They speak for themselves, but it is the most remarkable institution that we have in Southern California. In terms of research, in terms of teaching, in terms of practice, in terms of coverage, in terms of sheer numbers, right? So I know they're doing stuff there, right? I mean, there's a lot going on. What are some of the areas that you think are kind of mark themselves for excellence in the biosciences?
Well, I think that technology has finally gotten to the point where precision medicine is now truly able to be realized. We have a full biomanufacturing facility that we just opened up at the Pacific Design Center, where we have all the top technology when it comes to sequencing of DNA, RNA, protein, precision medicine. They're building kind of duplications of people to understand their disease from the computer and bioinformatics standpoints. And so it's precision medicine at the genome level. It's also precision medicine from computational biomedicine. There's a lot of AI work going on in LA as well. And then from a medical device perspective, we have a lot of expertise. We're doing a lot of trials when it comes to new medical devices that are coming through, a lot of work with industry. So there's a lot of things that are going on that I think LA has especially the expertise to be able to manage. But precision medicine, computational biomedicine are definitely at the top of the list.
So one of the things that people talk about when it comes to LA is, and this is a trust issue as well, right? A lot of our undervalued communities in Southern California do not trust the healthcare system. And so it becomes much harder to include them in clinical trials. And you need those in order to push precision medicine as far as it can go for these populations. Have you heard that, have you heard that, Stephen, in terms of the efforts that are going on to try and bring people into clinical trials and clinical studies, because that's an issue?
Yes, and it's a pervasive issue, the trust issue with not just our communities of color, right? Because across the nation, we've had this effect, this historic effect that sometimes when medical procedures are done on the community, it hasn't worked that well. So it's hard to basically say, trust us now. So you have to build that trust. And that's why many of the things that we've been doing as a region is to make sure that you start establishing engagement early on. And so as these resources are coming to the region, whether it's federal dollars, whether it's state dollars, that allows us to develop industry cluster, it's not an afterthought to engage a community. So this is going to be a long-term process to build that trust back up again. And they have to see, the community members have to see themselves as a part of the decision-making process and not just being outreach to after decisions are made.
We'll definitely engage this group and the entire sort of biosciences network in that process, because you identified the right kinds of things that are happening here.
But I think that that's important also, that there's a lot of development work going on in trying to include those communities in the healthcare system. So they're actually working in the system so they can see the system from the inside out and then understand that and trust the system a little bit more. And so there's a lot of work being done with instituting new schools, tech schools, nursing schools, and things like that in this area to engage those underserved communities, allow them to be a part of the healthcare system. And then as they grow up in the system, there's further trust that is engendered with that activity that's going on. So that's another way to bring trust into the community, not just from trying to engage with the communities now, but also promoting that for the future.
Just to show you how far we've come, right? This is 10 years ago. You've all heard of NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard. This was pervasive in Southern California when it came to putting in new biotech facilities, because people didn't want organs and cells around their communities. Fast forward now, everybody wants them, and increasingly they're moving through jurisdictional pressures at the county level. Whereas Kelly, she's here somewhere, at the county level, to cut through the red tape to permit these things faster. We talked about permitting in the last thing. Yes, sir. You have a question.
I just wanted to put out, Kelly was at the Bioscience LA meeting. I think it was the BioFutures showcase, but it was underrepresented groups who were participating in clinical trial management and therefore giving voice to the communities that they were part of. But I did want to ask Monica and anybody else who wants to join in terms of like the administrative costs of healthcare delivery and also the issue where doctors are complaining, I'm spending so much time working on paperwork instead of treating patients. Like I kind of wanted to hear a little bit about what you're seeing in that space because we're seeing like administrative costs of up to like 20% of care, which is like pretty high in a lot of cases.
Sure, yeah. That is definitely a huge issue. There are many startups that are attempting to target that, but it's not an easy issue to be solved. Administrative burden, on one hand, seems to be significant, but on the other hand is necessary as we attempt to better care for our patients. So, for example, if you are an oncology clinic and you're an oncologic surgeon, you need a patient care coordinator who can then work with the patient to schedule appointments with medical oncology and radiation oncology and supportive care and all of these other people. All of those different offices have their own nursing burden and clinic burden where nurses can then make sure that the patients are following up and getting all of their tests done. And you have surgery schedulers who then are scheduling the surgeries for all the physicians who are seeing these patients. And so there is a lot of administrative burden, but part of that is to help patients with their journey through the healthcare system when they were previously just left to try to manage it all on their own. And so it's an understanding of what patients need, but I totally agree with you that the administrative burden is huge. And so there is a big component of utilizing technology to try to assist with this. So there's a lot of startups who are working on patient care coordination, working with offices to reduce the administrative burden, working with surgery schedulers to make it easier to schedule surgeries. But as I mentioned before, healthcare moves very slowly. I still have a fax machine in my office. I know the fax machine number because I have to give it out to a lot of people because the only way that the communication occurs is over fax. And so I know it sounds ridiculous, but that is actually the case. And so if you're still dealing with those types of issues and that kind of old infrastructure that's in place in healthcare, you have to have that. But it just makes it that much more difficult to move into the 21st century, right? So there's a lot of back and forth when it comes to that. It's taken years upon years upon years to get the majority of medical practices to implement an electronic medical record. And we all talk about how the electronic medical record is very difficult to manage, useless a lot of the time. And so, there's a lot of work to be done, but it's difficult when it comes to healthcare when there's a lot of patient privacy issues and there's a lot of care coordination to be done and all of those types of things. And so I think that's a very difficult issue to be addressed kind of singularly. And there's a lot of people tackling it from different levels, but just like the EMR implementation, it's going to take a lot of time and there's going to be a lot of problems and a lot of errors along the way.
Thank you. Yes.
Dr. Jain, I want to, on that point of record keeping, mistakes is a big issue in medical care. Mistakes happen. So if you have accurate record keeping, maybe it reduces the mistakes a lot. It's that little tidbit of information that's not in the record that should be there can make all the difference.
I think that's part of it. It's not all record keeping. A lot of it has to do with someone getting a test somewhere else and me not having access to that test from there. And so having to redo that test here because I can't get access to the results because it's all done by paper. I get, reads for CT scans faxed to me, but a fax only means something, or a read in words only means something. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So there's a lot of different things that's not just a piece of information in a record that would lead to a mistake. There's something sometimes that 10 years ago, someone had X operation and they don't remember and they don't communicate that to me. 10 years ago, there was no electronic medical record for me to be able to glean that information from. And so part of this is just like, if I'm taking care of an 80-year-old patient who had a surgery when they were 60 and there was no electronic medical record, but that's important for me to know, and they don't remember, because how can you expect a patient to know all of the medical terminology and everything that happened to them if they're not a physician themselves? There's a lot of kind of underlying issues in there. So, again, very, very complex when it comes to the healthcare system, which is why having someone on the inside makes a big difference when it comes to developing innovations and understanding a lot of these problems.
And to add to that complexity, in Los Angeles, you add the language barrier. But there are many monolingual speakers or elderly individuals who might not know the medical terminology. So now there's, to your point, there's a lot of folks that are trying to bring up with new technology that will allow us to communicate that with their family care team in that sense. But the privacy issue also becomes so all that coordination, hopefully technology will play a role to make it a bit more streamlined, but there's so many challenges.
Yeah, and this has been going on for quite some time, by the way, whole instant language translation, point of care, pharmacy, medical adherence, medication adherence, and having this translated to multiple languages, etc. Dave.
I was just going to add a glimmer of hope on that whole discussion there. I work a lot, as you know, with the military medical community, and this is a clearly recognized area with them, very multicultural, very diverse, veterans as well as active duty, and a big stimulator for CERNA and the creation of electronic health records. Now the question is how to better utilize all that information and how to support, ideally properly reduce the administrative burden and give more decision support. And DHA, the Defense Health Agency, is about to make some large investments in that area. So I do think you're going to see federal government money coming in to try and help, stimulate some of that as well.
Because with Cerner and the other EMR producers, one of the problems is lack of interoperability, right? And it still plagues them. It plagues Cedars. And I've spoken to doctors at Cedars who say, when you have different systems, sometimes you can only see a little bit, and you can't see all of it, and you need to see all of it as a doctor,
But I think, to Monica's point earlier, generative AI was a big break on AI. And as a result, there is some significant funds shifting to try and help with administrative burden, decision support, bolt-ons to the ER, and the electronic health records and the like. So I think you're going to see billion-dollar numbers investments coming from the federal government in that area.
Excellent. So, folks, thank you so much. We're going to be having our Heal.LA demo day tomorrow, and a panel in which Monica is going to be an all-woman panel in the morning prior to the presentations, and then we'll have a break and then bench of fellows in the afternoon. So thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate your support and your leadership on life sciences. We've got a new kind of initiative going called Grow LA Bio, which is intended specifically to reduce some of the burdens that the bioscience industry in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area, has to deal with, and also increase the incentives for people to locate here and for the monies to be here. So thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, Monica. I really appreciate it. Round of applause.